सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Before we begin, I'd like to make an appeal. For those who haven't already, I request you to take ThePrint's YouTube membership, which only costs 159 rupees a month. Click on the Join button to enjoy exclusive member benefits, including loyalty badges, priority responses to your questions, and member-only videos. We are now also extending newsletters to our YouTube members. For this, I request all YouTube members to write to us with their full name and email address at members@theprint.in. That's members@theprint.in, and we'll personally get back to you. 4 weeks before the faithful raise the chalice to their lips, drinking from a pool of grape-flavored Kool-Aid and cyanide, they assemble to hear their prophet's sermon. The People's Temple Agricultural Project, American preacher Jim Jones told his followers, was the purest communist model that exists. The utopia in the jungles of Guyana had dissolved race and class and ended the use of money. But the problem of production remained unresolved. True communism needed hard work, he said, and altruistic sacrifice. 8 hours of work, 8 hours of study, and then 8 hours of rest. There is such unity and solidarity that they do not have one jail in the country inhabited by over 15 million people, Jones said. They exalt their leader Kim Il-sung as a savior, as a god. Last week, as warships from the United States and South Korea exercised off its waters, North Korea threatened to use nuclear weapons, following up its words with a barrage of missiles and hostile Air Force maneuvers. In September, the Kim Jong-un regime passed a new law authorizing preemptive nuclear strikes if it faced attack. Ever since 1950, the shadow of nuclear weapons has hung over the Koreas, but the savage logic of mutually assured destruction has kept the peace. The nuclear threat held by North Korea, scholar Andrei Lankov argues, aren't intended to usher in the apocalypse. The US and its Western allies just can't afford a crisis erupting in Asia as the war in Ukraine rages on. Kim Jong-un hopes to leverage this to secure relief from sanctions that have battered his regime. The People's Temple ended in November 1978 with the mass suicide of 909 members choosing death over defeat. The story gives us reasons to question just when it is that the ideological mind can lose its hold on logic. And that should make us ask some fundamental questions about how safe we should really feel about North Korea's threats. The first statue of Kim Il-sung, founding patriarch of North Korea, historian Bruce Cummings records, was unveiled on Christmas Day in 1949. The leader was to form the core of a new faith, Juche, as a kind of secular Christ. The birthday of Father Marshall would be celebrated as the Day of the Sun. Yoon Hee Shin, a scholar of religions, has suggested that Juche evolved into, and I quote, an indigenous national religion, institutionalized through its own sacraments like the Arirang Mass Gymnastics Festival. Like all millenarian movements, the cult of the Kims emerged from social trauma, in this case the savage war that erupted in the Koreas in 1953. The war killed 5 million people, half of them civilians, and leveled entire cities. From an early stage in the conflict, Nathan Jennings records, US military commanders repeatedly pressed for authority to use nuclear weapons. The timely use of atomic weapons should be considered against military targets, the Joint Chiefs of Staff argued back then. Turning the wasteland that emerged from this barbaric war into a socialist utopia needed altruistic sacrifice. And that political leaders in North Korea believed needed religious faith. From early in the 1980s, Kim Il-sung's successor, his son Kim Jong-il, had dropped references to Marxism-Leninism from official doctrine. Kongdan Oh and Ralph Hassig have observed that party literature described Kim Il-sung as a kind of national father who commanded unconditional loyalty, and the Communist Party as a mother who dispensed love and trust. The reluctance of the working class to embrace socialist altruism, Mo Taylor has written, gave such ideas currency among some other radical third world leaders as well. Lyndon Burnham, Guyana's ruler, even invited North Korean experts to inspire his own people. The experiment failed because of, the stubborn refusal of Guyana rice farmers to wake up before dawn and work for 8 hours or more without a break. Ethiopian experts, similarly invited to Pyongyang, fled home after experiencing paradise firsthand. Large-scale famine, known as the March of Suffering, claimed millions of lives between 1994 and 1998. Food shortages and desperate poverty remain a feature of life in the socialist utopia. The Gulag awaited North Koreans who angered their loving parents by protesting. From satellite imaging and survivor testimony, it is now known hundreds of thousands were pushed into concentration camps for wrong thinking, wrong knowledge, and wrong class backgrounds. Factionalists or enemies of class, whoever they are, their seed must be eliminated through 3 generations, Kim Il-sung proclaimed. Faced with internal dissension, the leaders of the People's Temple began arming itself. Tensions, Federal Bureau of Investigation records show, had been fueled by the privileges Jones and his inner circle enjoyed. The leaders and their children had better food than other temple members. While romantic intimacy between the rank and file was discouraged in the cult, Jones had sex with temple women and men. The prophet, one member would recall, was a sexual predator addict. The growing fascination in the temple leadership with the North Korean model of social control, declassified government records show, resulted in a series of clandestine meetings between its diplomats and the temple leadership in Guyana. The temple leaders created armed squads and threatened dissidents with death. Leo Ryan, a member of the United States Congress who flew into Guyana to investigate these reports in November 1978, was shot dead by a temple death squad along with 4 others. Like the temple, the People's Republic prepared for assault from the outside. Following the war of 1950-1953, Kim Il-sung issued 4 key guidelines calling for the modernization of weapons, the arming of the population, the fortification of the country, and giving the military a central role in the power structure. North Korea built up artillery and missile capabilities that would allow it to level cities and industrial infrastructure in the south within minutes. As the North Korean economy began to stall in the 1970s, the further modernization of its conventional forces became difficult. Kim Jong-il now looked for a more reliable and cheaper deterrent, the nuclear bomb. There was a problem though. The Soviet Union had helped North Korea establish a nuclear research program in the 1950s, but the assistance had later dried up. The technology that the People's Republic needed eventually came from Pakistan. In 1993, former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto visited Pyongyang to acquire missile technology. 4 years later, Islamabad provided the People's Republic with the centrifuges and uranium hexafluoride it needed to kickstart its nuclear weapons program. Led by the 3rd generation of the Kim dynasty, Kim Jong-un, the People's Republic is now estimated to have up to 55 nuclear warheads and the capability to deliver them globally. Exulting in the mental sunshine induced by methamphetamine, Jones addressed his followers for the last time on the night his death squad murdered Congressman Ryan. "I have loved you," he said. "I have tried to give you a good life." But he went on, "A handful of people have with their lies made our lives impossible. If we can't live in peace, then let's die in peace. Little children were administered the lethal Kool-Aid with syringes before their parents drank it. Finally, Jones shot himself. The cult novelist Shiva Naipaul, the great V.S. Naipaul's brother, wrote, was obsessed with sin and images of apocalyptic destruction, authoritarian in its innermost impulses, instinctively thinking in terms of the saved and the damned. The end it achieved was neither racial justice nor socialism, but a messianic parody of both. Efforts to co-opt North Korea into the regional framework largely collapsed by 2008 as evidence of its nuclear and missile ambitions increased. Even though a small elite prospered as the North Korean economy opened up under Kim Jong-un, those gains have proved ephemeral. The summit meetings between Kim Jong-un and former US President Donald Trump, despite their colorful and roseate optics, have led nowhere because North Korea would not commit to limit its nuclear ambitions, no matter the economic incentives. If you have to choose between cash and survival, most regimes will choose the latter. The gilded life of the Kim dynasty, its bourgeois-like excesses documented by journalist Anna Fifield, make them improbable candidates to embrace a People's Temple-like mass suicide pact. Kim, after all, revels in wealth and power. The question to ask, however, is what he'll do if he's faced with the prospect of losing that wealth and that power, just like the cult in Guyana did. I'm Praveen Swami, and I'm National Security Editor of ThePrint. Thank you for listening to Security Code.